So let's just get into it. Last live, we ended in a very good note when we were talking about the inoculation, and that's what stuck with me, Nicholas, on
Mm,
the inoculation from the story I shared, how the mother was inoculating her child from the experience that they were going to have in the future. So it really left a mark with me, and thank you for that.
yeah, yeah. This idea, Renee, that a parent could be proactive in trying, in punishing a child, in doing something, in causing some negative feelings in the child, so that they don't then go on into society and be the recipient of further violence, or further punishments. And it's a bit of a, it's a tricky idea, isn't it? But it's such a common thing.
It is.
I For me, in thinking about that, I was thinking, there is this particular period of development for the child, and the child is forming their worldview, their view of the world. And so, if you, as a parent who represent the safest place in this world, um, end up punishing your child too strongly, then in a way you end up also confusing the idea of safety that this child is forming, right? Like, here inside the house is my safe world. Outside the house, I need to be more careful. But if inside the world is also not safe, then that child's brain begins to be affected, right? Um,
Absolutely.
and there is maybe also an issue of like breaking the will of the child, like particularly if we're talking about these children who are very curious and very sort of proactive in exploring the world and exploring the unknown. If we go and punish them because they've been explorative, then we are going to break their will. And maybe that's exactly what you want to do as a parent in a society where you're living under a dictatorship, such as more or less communism was, or some of the more like North Korea, the dictatorships there are today in the world. Like, you know, maybe that's exactly what you want to do. You want to break the will of curiosity of the child, but then that has consequences, and that was the whole point of our sharings about the story of Samuel, right? That we can go back in childhood and observe um, some of these important interactions, and then see the effects that this has much later on in life. Because when Samuel begins to have his teeth rotting, I mean, that is a lot of pain. I don't know if any one of you has had, what do you call it? Like when one of the teeth start to rot a little
Extraction,
bit,
is it? Yeah.
it
Yeah.
attacks the nerve, and it's really
Yeah.
painful. You can't even sleep at night when that happens,
Absolutely.
right? And so if that is happening over several teeth and over several years, to me, if you're tolerating that and continuing to behave in a way that doesn't solve the situation, to me, that's almost like when you self-arm, when you take an iron and you start to iron the skin of your arm, or when you bite or pick with your nails your skin to cause real wounds or things like it. It's what you would expect a person doing to wake themselves up from a numbness, a kind
Yeah.
of a hypostate. So you have a child that is very, very curious and very active and sort of hyper, if you like. And then his will gets broken. So this child learns to go into hypostates, right? It counterbalances his hyperactivity with a very, very numb state, right? But that, of course, is not life. For that child, that's a kind of death of
Yeah.
his will, a death of his inner life, right? Um, and so then later, when that hypostate starts to become really dangerous, because overall it numbs all the emotions. You can't be numbing only of curiosity. If you numb
Yeah.
yourself, you numb yourself over all the emotions. So when we are numb, we don't know where to go. We don't know whether we want to go towards something or away from something. We lose perception of desire, motivation. We just do not know how to navigate the world anymore. So
Yeah.
numb states become very dangerous. And so then the brain tries to reactivate the brain and bring it back into a more normal state by self-harming.
Yeah.
The purpose of self-harming is most often to counteract a numbing of oneself. So you can see kind of a vicious cycle process of the brain essentially trying to regulate a very early experience that they had no control over. And
Yeah.
that's the definition of a traumatic experience, isn't it? It's to be put in a place of a threat, of feeling that you are not safe and not being able to do anything about it. So that was overall the whole point of this discussion. When we look at the question that we had, have your parents or somebody close in your community have insulted you and humiliated you, then first of all we need to point out that this can be a very long developmental process, and that it's not just one person, but it's multiple
Absolutely.
people that can be involved in this process. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was such a conclusive and a broad subject that you really had to give justice on the developmental stages of it. And I think that even leads us to maybe the third question. How do you feel about getting into the next question?
Yeah, by all means. Let's move on. Let's try to move on. We still have 8 more, so I'm sure
Yeah,
our viewers are, eager to see
we
more.
get to.
And by the way, I don't know if we can give the QR code that we have, but our viewers can actually go and do this test before we have discussed all of these questions, because we're going to stay a little open to the kind of stories we're going to bring to illustrate every one of these questions. So it might take a while for us to cover all the questions, but if viewers want to go and do the test, then they can do it. I think we have a QR code. I don't know if you can show it right now, Renee.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I actually have it together with the question. So just to present for the viewers who are watching, we have a QR code. Here it is coming up. Just use your phone to scan it, and you'll be able to get all the questions we have for you with this particular ACE test. It will really be encouraging for them to just follow with us with this. So
Yeah.
I think
So
we
you'll
have
be able, to basically, you just have to answer a yes or a no, and then you count the yeses, and you can send that score to me, and I can give you a little comment if you like. Or you can take that score and go online and compare it to statistics. Nowadays, you could even go to ChatGPT and say, "Hey, ChatGPT, I've just done the ACE test to check the level of my trauma. I got a score of 4. Could you, tell me what this means?" And then ChatGPT should be able to give you a context to your answer. Otherwise, take a screenshot of this QR code, and then you can go to this webpage that we have created for you to take the test. There's no commercial side to this link, so
absolutely.
it's just for you to use for your own benefit. So let's get on with the third question, Renee.
Absolutely. I'm just giving them time to take the screenshot, and let me
Mm,
just actually I could actually put it up again for our next lives, so that everyone will be on the same particular wavelength on it, and so that, like you said, they can use other tools to use to go through it. So on our next question, uh, it actually even touch in it's a great segue to this one that we just covered. It is on physical violence. Let me just bring it up so that all of us can get to share. This is
So a parent or other adult in the
yes,
household, often or very often. So instead of insulted you, humiliated you, like it was the second
yeah,
question, in this case, it's
yeah,
pushed you, grabbed you, slapped you, or threw something at you. So this is a much more physical interaction, isn't it? We're still
absolutely,
talking about injuring somebody, but now we're doing it with more a material, uh, the material side of things. Hit me so hard that I had marks or was injured, right? Right, Renee?
absolutely.
Like it's almost like the same as the second question, but it's just much more physical.
Absolutely. And I think just to bring it to manifest it and to just give an example, if I may share a story on it.
Yeah, by all
Um,
means. Yeah.
so where I am, just to reiterate for the audience, I live in Nairobi, Kenya, East Africa. Like I said in the first live, in case you didn't catch, in this country, corporal punishment is very common. In fact, in within the households, 58% of children get corporal punishment. So they are beaten and slapped by their parents. So over 50%. And sometimes these cases can be quite severe. In fact, there's one particular case whereby a child uh, happened to be on the end of the suspicion that the mother sus- really had a major suspicion that the child stole some money from her purse. So
Mm.
that money, if you convert it, it actually converts to around maybe 20 cents when it comes to euros.
Oh, wow.
Very, very small amount. And the reaction that this mother did is that she tied the child's arms and burnt them, set
Burn
them on
them.
fire, burnt, lit a fire on them. What happened was that the neighbors had to come and intervene in this particular situation and actually help the child from having permanent, losing their hands. And the logic behind this, the mother said, is that thieves in this culture are taken very harshly. Like when thieves are apprehended in this culture, I think it's same almost in the Middle East. It's almost a death sentence, like a penal code. That
Mm.
it is really not in any way uh, allowed
Tolerated.
and tolerated in any way. So the severity of the reaction, even though it was just 10 cents, barely a euro, barely a euro, but that could actually be maybe a significant portion. I would say maybe 15% of her daily wage for a very, very casual worker. So it really showed that for a child to experience something like that in its severity, that the mother will actually enact through fire, literally burning those hands, that these hands that I suspect you took money from me, I'm reacting in this way by tying them and setting them on fire. So it really got me to
So,
thinking of this.
Renee,
Yeah.
the first question comes to mind is your highlighting that you are in Nairobi, Kenya, a way for you to say that there is something special about your culture that this happens? Because we hear of stories like this even in the United States, in
Mm.
France, in Germany. I mean, if we focus on the most brutal stories, which are usually the ones that make it to the media, right? Um, then we find brutal stories absolutely everywhere in the world. Like, for
Absolutely.
example, I lived in Japan for 7 years, one of absolutely the safest countries in the world I've ever been to. Incredibly, incredibly safe. And once I heard this story about, I will cut it really short, but there was a child that of 9 that cut the head of one of his parents and carried the head in the backpack for 2 days. I mean, like absolutely unbelievable things. So I don't think you want to make this point, right? Like, it's not about Nairobi or Kenya, but you were mentioning corporal punishment is normalized.
Yeah.
That's the point you're making, right? That corporal
Totally.
punishment is normalized. And here we are, Nicholas, where we are confronted with a question that actually makes every one of these normal acts a reason for becoming traumatized. Is that where
Absolutely.
you're coming from?
Yes, actually, and the intensity of it is almost left to the parent. Like you said, we have touched on other where the parent has total control. That whatever happens, they will still remain the parent. So, living in a society where it's very normalized and even encouraged, it really brings in the setting of yeah, exactly like what you said. That the society and how we actually just embrace it. you know, and
Mm. Yeah,
that's
we're back to
practically.
the discourse on community, right? Like we were
Yeah.
analyzing the case of Samuel from the context of a communist regime, dictatorial more or less regime, and now we are looking at the Kenyan society in the context of corporal punishment being normalized. It's almost like as if we can't really separate the social context in which we live from the answers that we would give to these questions, right? Although here the questions are always targeted towards the primary caretakers, a
Yes.
parent or other adult, um, usually indicating someone that is closely related to the caretaking of this child. Um, but of course, if you know, uncles and neighbors and then teachers and uh, adults generally in a position of authority also enact that physical violence, then it becomes a real issue. Then it's not just a parent or not just a primary caregiver, right? um, I know, again, coming back to certain very conservative religious circle, for example, where these kind of acts of violence can be common, and they are enacted by all the members of this very exclusive religious circle, because they all agree that that's the way that you safeguard the child from the devil,
Mm.
basically, right? Because the world is, and almost in a way, there is a little pattern emerging here, one that these questions do not make clear, and one that sincerely I haven't really read the literature talking much about, but is that oftentimes if the parents' worldview of the world is that the world is dangerous and full of evil, then the parents have a bigger tolerance of violence towards their own child. Like what the parent allows themselves to do is almost proportional to what they think the world might do to their children.
Mm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And it actually is completely, and sometimes we think that it is worse because in fact, maybe if I'm going to just mention, we have a saying here. I don't know if it's a quick translation to other cultures where they say, if you're not taught by your mother, you'll be taught by the world. So it's a Swahili
There you go.
proverb.
There you
Yeah.
go.
So that really makes and even cultivates the mindset that they take when it comes to upbringing of these children.
Could you tell us more about the corporal punishment um, culture? I know that this is also common in Korea, or at least it was common until very recently. I have a good friend who is Korean and who experienced corporal punishment at school. I know that about 10 years ago, there was a law that was passed that was banning this kind of corporal punishment in schools. But until very recently, even like the South Korea was, doing this, and there are many other nations in the world. What could you tell us more about this? What has been your experience of this, both at home
So
or at school?
So for corporal punishment, and I think yeah, we're just getting a bit of a loss of time, but I'll actually just touch upon it as we pick up
True.
next slide.
Yeah.
Uh, my experience with corporal punishment has been it had been completely, I would say, normalized from preschool to the primary school. So up to the ages of 13, up until it was gotten to some legislators got to really address I got to experience most of it, and I really would be interested in sharing that in the other lives that we have, especially starting for the next ones. That for those who have subscribed, and I tell people to subscribe, I really want to share with these stories with you and get to go through these questions with you. For those who, like you said, you have the QR code. I believe everyone has these questions. We look forward to sharing and discussing on them. So thank you so
Yeah.
much, Nicholas, for starting
Yeah.
that
Thank you very
discussion.
much. Yeah. Thank you for spending another 20 minutes with me, with our viewers today, talking all about trauma through storytelling, right, Renee? That's our purpose
Absolutely.
here, to bring the theory closer to life
to
stories.
home.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I look forward to seeing you again.
All right. See you guys. Bye bye.
See you, everyone. Bye.